Our next speaker is going to be discussing bringing tech and tradition together. He holds a number of roles in different companies as an e-commerce entrepreneur, non-exec director, mentor, coach, and facilitator, with 15 years under his belt working in the creative and tech arena. Sean Sankey, director at Much Clearer Ltd, is recognised as a leading authority in the growth sprint approach and has consulted for Hewlett-Packard, Capgemini, the Manchester Growth Company, and dozens of SMEs. He has taken over 55 companies through the sprint methodology to transform their approach to growth. I'd like to invite Sean onto the virtual stage to share his expertise with us this morning. Sean.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm just going to share some slides. Thank you for that introduction, Zoe. You can never live up to a nice introduction. I feel like the most important thing to say probably, because there may be some translation issues, and that's notwithstanding the tech, is I'm a Scouser who lives in Yorkshire and works with technology businesses across Europe. So we live in contradictory times, and if that's not a contradiction, I don't know what is. So listen, my topic this morning is bringing tech and tradition together. We're quite a broad church on the call, as I understand it this morning. We've got representation from a huge swathe of different businesses, of different types, of different sizes, and you're all at different stages in your digital journey. We've got representatives here from companies that would fit under what we could call the traditional banner: manufacturers, folk in the primary industries, farming, retailers, service businesses. I know that we've got a bunch of leaders and businesses here from what I would consider the digital and creative arena. It'd be agencies, app developers, PR companies, design and build specialists. And we've got a lot of tech providers, so pure play startups, IT and infrastructure resellers, etc. And it's quite tough to actually bring a talk to such a varied audience that hopefully will be relevant and interesting to all. But the good news is that we've got a really, as Zoe said before, a really packed schedule with some phenomenally niche and specific, what I would call kind of equipping information today. So here's how I see my job just for this first session. I'd like to set some context and set a bit of tone, hopefully provoke a little bit of thought. I'd stop short of saying inspiration because nobody would ever want to commit to that. But just share a few stories and some examples of how regional players and companies big and small are harnessing technology and digital that may kind of just inspire a few of you if you're in those sectors. And what I really want to do is lay the groundwork for some of the fantastic stuff that you're going to get, particularly in the workshops. This is one of those conferences where I guess looking at the schedule, if you could split yourself in 6 and go 6 different ways, that'd be amazing. But we've got some hard choices to make when it comes to the breakouts. So anyway, that's my job for today. And I'm going to do it by moving through 3 different sections. I want to talk about something I've been thinking a lot about recently, which is paradox. And ideas that seemingly shouldn't go together, but totally do. And the idea of tradition and technology coming together might seem like a bit of a paradox, but it's a really important idea, and I want to explore that. The second thing we'll talk about is I want to share some stories, like I said, about big and small players teaming up, proving the point that you don't need to be a massive VC-backed company based in London to be winning fantastic contracts with big partners. And similarly, you don't need to be in a really sexy tech-led sector to really embrace the best of what digital has to offer. So that'll be section 2. And section 3 is I want to give you, for the fact that we are a very broad audience, it's tough to do this, but I do want to give some specific tips to each of those 3 communities that I mentioned that hopefully wherever you find yourself in your digital journey will be relevant for you just to kick on to that next level. So I'll give you some very practical priorities to thrive, I'm calling it, in section 3. And hopefully, as I say, this is going to be interesting for everyone on the call. So let's kick off with paradox. And I'll tell you what, I like to define terms to begin with. So a paradox, what's that? Well, a paradox is an idea that seems contradictory, 2 kind of opposing thoughts, if you like, that shouldn't really go together. But actually, if you can find a way to reconcile a paradox, it expresses like quite a deep truth. Now, what do I mean? Well, let me start off with a bit of a story to illustrate what a paradox is, and then we'll apply it to our topic today. We're living in pretty paradoxical times, and I don't want to like weigh this too heavy, but it was literally only yesterday that our mate Rishi, who was paying half price for us all to eat out in August, and giving us money from the magic money tree over the last few months, he's everybody's mate. This guy should never pay for a drink again. I've heard many people say, and I probably agree. But yesterday we had some pretty tough news, I think, and as business owners and leaders everywhere, it can feel pretty bleak, and it can feel like COVID has come along and just trashed everything that we were hoping for, everything that we were building. And one of my clients said to me yesterday, it feels just like I'm in a bit of a war zone right now. And I'm not ashamed to say, like, at both ends of the camera, actually, there was a few tears shed about, we were just talking about how tough it is from a personal and a professional level just to stay resilient. And it got me thinking about a story that I heard a while ago, but keeps coming back to me as something that's really compelling. There was a chap, and some of you might know this story. There was a chap called James Stockdale, Admiral Jim Stockdale. He was a fighter pilot in Vietnam. And halfway through the Vietnam War, he was actually shot down over enemy territory. And for 8 years was in what's called the Hanoi Hilton. He was in a prisoner of war camp out in Vietnam. For 8 years, endured probably the worst kind of torture that any of us can think about, but managed to keep his resolve as a leader of all his fellow prisoners, and maintained hope and optimism that despite everything that was going on, despite the awfulness of the situation, ultimately they would get out and that we would prevail. And 8 years later, from 1965 to 1973, they were trapped there, but ultimately they did make it out. Now, what was really interesting was that he was interviewed a little while later, and was asked, you got out, and the men that you were commanding seemed to be remarkably resilient in making it out. What happened there? Because so many didn't. And he said, well, it's kind of easy, but very difficult at the same time. He said some folk just allowed the awfulness of the situation, completely understandably, to overwhelm them. And ultimately, they didn't last very long. But what was really fascinating is at the other end of the spectrum, you had the raw optimists. These were the people that were looking at the calendar and going, we're going to be out by Christmas. And then Christmas came and went. And they would look and say, well, we're going to be out by Easter. It's going to be fine. We're going to make it out of this. But then Easter would come and go. And he said it wouldn't take a couple of cycles of that before people just died of a broken heart. And his point was that if you give in to the raw negativity of the situation, that'll crush you. But equally, if you deny the brutal reality of what's confronting you and just become a naked optimist, that will also crush you. And this has become known as what's called the Stockdale paradox. Yeah? It's this demand on leaders, folk like you and me, who are bearing the weight of trying to keep our businesses thriving and growing, dare I say, even just alive, for many of us. How do we do? We have to be at the same time embracing a bit of a paradox that we need to be 100% confronting and not ignoring the most brutal facts of our reality. And yet we also need to maintain 100% faith that we're going to prevail in the end. Yeah, and this was documented by Jim Collins in a fantastic book that many of you will have read called Good to Great. Yeah, and his book was, there's a lot of fluff out there in a lot of business books. But what I like about Good to Great is Jim Collins actually went into the data and looked at, I think it was over 1,000 companies across 40 years. I think it was a 5-year effort to write this book. And he said, what are the patterns that make some good businesses really great? What helps them outperform the market? Yeah. And one of the things they found was that the businesses that became truly great were leaders that intuitively embraced a bit of this Stockdale paradox, that could look at the reality of what was going on in their market, in the economic cycle, and they weren't afraid of it. They didn't dumb their eyes to it. But that didn't overwhelm them. They maintained faith that they could and would prevail in the end. And I think that we need to do the same right now. I think that all of us, no matter how crushed we feel or how kind of much we want to disassociate from it and just be really optimistic, if we come back to the Stockdale paradox, this tension of two opposing forces, to go, listen, I could simplify it to say it like this: the odds are absolutely against success right now. You know, we are inevitably in a once in a century event which has untold consequences. The odds are absolutely against success. And yet, we lead our businesses in such a way where we think, you know what, we will absolutely succeed. That kind of tension, those two opposing concepts need to come together in our minds as we lead our companies. And I think that's relevant for us, regardless of our sector, of our business type, and where we are in this awful pandemic. So that's an example of a paradox of two opposing ideas that fit together and that we need to hold in tension. Here's paradox number 2. Tradition and craft, old things, businesses that some would look at and go, oh, they're dinosaurs, or that, you know, that's from a bygone era. It's wrong to think, or it's wrong to have that lens on tradition and craft businesses, because actually they thrive through technical innovation. Now, what do I mean by that? You know, I could give you so many stories about this, and we all know our own examples, but let's think about it like this. What have we seen over the last, particularly 10, 12 years? We've seen many things, but one interesting trend is that we've seen an absolute resurgence in a lot of what we might consider, you know, traditional, analog, old school crafts. Knitting clubs and sales of wool, I kid you not, going through the absolute roof. Kodak bringing back old film stocks that they discontinued in the late 90s with the advent of digital. They're bringing back new lines of stock as film photography is doubling year on year. Vinyl sales in Australia going up 6 to 12% year on year since 2005. And you know, fountain pens, and people getting into lettering, enjoying a huge boom, where a small niche business like Goulet Pens in America can, you know, set up a mom and pop shop, you know, with a small YouTube channel in, I think it was 2008. And now they're employing 40 people, shipping products all over the world. There's this resurgence in traditional type businesses, traditional sectors, traditional crafts. But the interesting thing is that that's all powered by digital. It's all been enabled by this explosion of online forums, of Instagram, and selling and crafting a lifestyle that people aspire to, of the ability for niche providers to get direct routes to market and sell products at a price that consumers can pay. You know, it's digital and it's technology that ironically is fueling the growth in traditional and craft style companies. And it's not just what we're seeing kind of with the internet and how that's kind of empowering traditional sectors. You know, traditional sectors are harnessing the power of technology within their products, within their operations, within their supply chains. And again, there's dozens of examples of this, and you know, you'll hear many as we go through today. But just one thing that I would share with you, I'm a bit of a watch geek. I enjoy a nice watch. Not a crazy expensive watch like a Vacheron Constantin, which sounds ridiculous. The Scouts are trying to talk in French. But some of you, I mean, you may not have even heard of this brand. You know, think of Rolex and Omega, and then you get to the tiers of haute horology, which are, you know, Audemars Piguet, Vacheron Constantin, Jaeger-LeCoultre. Like, you know, these are timepieces that are going to cost you 20, 30, upwards of 50 grand to get a Vacheron Constantin. Old school watchmakers, you know, men with loops and kind of, you know, putting tiny little gears together with tweezers, are using blockchain to add digital certificates to their timepieces to prevent fraud and fakes flooding the market. A real problem in that sector of the market is authentication. And so these, you know, really niche, old school, traditional brands are looking to technology to solve those problems. How do we reassure our customer base, beyond just a paper certificate, that that timepiece they've spent 50,000 on is genuine? Blockchain has become part of the answer. And there's dozens and dozens and dozens of examples we could look at. So tradition and technology are not in competition, they come together. And paradox number 3 is kind of the inverse of that. Traditions need technologies to thrive. Similarly, technologies need old traditions so they can be usefully adopted. People in the somewhat, like some would say, like sexy end of the market, like looking at tech, you know, they shouldn't look down on their traditional colleagues across different sectors, you know, because actually it's working those technologies into those industries where those businesses are going to see real growth. And I'll tell you what I mean by telling a few stories. This is where I want to kind of get really kind of practical with some examples of regional players and businesses that are teaming up with traditional sectors to do interesting things with digital and technology. So here you go. I'll tell you 3 very quick stories. Okay, a brand that all of you will have heard of, and a brand that probably none of you will have heard of. So the Co-op. It's the oldest food retailer in the UK, been around since the mid-19th century. Yeah, most of us live within a couple of miles of a Co-op. I've got one just down the road. Yeah, Niveo is a company that I've done a lot of work with. So Niveo is a small business out in South Manchester, so Timpler, and colleagues out in Helsinki. So 2 companies that came together to merge into Niveo, and I've done a lot of work with these guys on their go-to-market proposition and their brand, and launching a new thing into the market. The Co-op we all know for being a local retailer. They've been around a long time. They survived every crisis. And, as other players have come and gone, anyone remember QuickSave or Summerfield or Safeway? These were all people playing in the same space, but Co-op have always thrived. Yeah. And one of the ways they've thrived is they have evolved with the times, yet still preserved a lot of what makes them a traditional trusted brand. Yeah. And in the face of competition, being kind of crushing from the big 3, Asda, Sainsbury's, and Tesco's, Co-op did something really interesting with Niveo around their e-commerce capability. Co-op became the first grocer in the UK to offer 2-hour grocery delivery. In fact, I think there's still nobody else in the UK that does this. Yeah, and they did it by pursuing a strategy where they looked at their estate and they were looking at saying, what's the right way for us to use digital and for us to use technology? Well, if we follow the crowd and if we do what Asda and Tesco and the rest of them are doing, we'd have massive e-commerce platforms with click and collect and one big monolithic IT system, which everything is driven through. And we would run our deliveries through big warehouses, et cetera, et cetera. That's what they would do. But they said, no, that's not us. That's not our heritage. We're about local. We're about familiar. We're about fulfilling what they call smaller shopping missions. It's not the big shop that you go to Co-op for. It's getting a pizza and some beers for a Friday night, or it's getting a top-up shop on your way home from work. Yeah, or it's going, I haven't got anything for lunch. I'll just nip out and you're seeing as well trapped at home right now. Yeah, that's what Co-op are for, and that's how their brand's about. So they chose to use a headless e-commerce system. And without getting into too much of the technicalities around it, headless e-commerce is about using lots of flexible small components instead of one massive monolithic system. And it's very good at enabling in-store picking and tracking last mile delivery. And Niveo, not IBM, not Salesforce, not Accenture, but Niveo, a small kind of, software provider in a suburb of Manchester, and some colleagues out on an industrial estate, out in Finland, they were the technology provider that came together to help the Co-op exploit that system and deploy it across their estate. Yeah, and Co-op has just posted their biggest record ever. They turned over 10 billion this year, first time ever, and it's largely driven by food sales. Yeah, so a small regional provider made that happen by harnessing what a traditional brand wanted to do to evolve itself. I'll tell you another super quick story. So Active Profile, a brand that, again, probably many of you will never have heard of. So super small, 12 folk out in the sunny and sophisticated South Liverpool. Yeah, trust me, such a place exists. Active Profile, PR outfit, ostensibly. Yeah, small PR and communications business. Okay, they do a lot of work with commercial property clients, big developers, Allied Londons, the Knight Franks, the big investors that look after, almost billion-pound developments for commercial property, for residential estates, etc. And, that sector of commercial property, my gosh, if you were looking at something that could be characterized as stuffy and old boys network, commercial property doesn't go far wrong. I'm being a bit cheeky with some of these photos, but you just look at some of the websites of these businesses and you feel like you're in the 80s. Yeah. But here's the thing about commercial property is they need to constantly engage prospects. So if I've got a 2 million square foot letting, I need to get that out to big tenants. Yeah. And I need to be engaging those prospects. I need to be engaging tenants. I need to be winning funding from Chinese and Middle Eastern investors to build my next development. Engagement is critical. And a small PR business in Liverpool has chosen to become a really niche provider of solutions to commercial property clients, to the point where they're doing, I kid you not, social media campaigns. And you think, social media campaigns to land big B2B deals? Absolutely. Using LinkedIn as a channel and even Facebook as an awareness driver to secure leads for big developers to get a bank to take 200 seats in a big office. That's now becoming a thing. And that's a profile of running a lot of those campaigns. They're even starting to help out in a collaboration with what's called the Virtual Engineering Centre. So it's an offshoot of Liverpool University, which is really into VR and AR. They're partnering with them to take an offer to market around helping developers do what's called AR walkthroughs. So a problem for a commercial property developer is that they need to sell the dream, sell the vision of what a development's going to look like. Yeah, but how do you do that when everyone's all over the world and trapped in their homes? Well, you do it by using virtual reality and augmented reality in a really intelligent way. Yeah. So a small PR outfit is making that happen. And here's the thing, when you get a vision for how you can serve a sector to solve an old problem using new technology, you can really thrive. And final story I'll tell you. So B&Q, who hasn't bought a tool or something from B&Q? I mean, particularly as I've got a list of jobs this long from my wife through lockdown of stuff to do in the house. So we've all been going to B&Q. 1969 B&Q launched in this country, and it's been around for donkeys. Okay. And I think it's fair to say B&Q are the industry leader in terms of tools and homewares. Yeah. But still, B&Q was suffering what is an industry-wide problem. When it comes to bathrooms and selling bathroom sales, there's a higher what's called an abandonment rate of projects. Yeah, so people kick off, go into a store, get a vision for a new bathroom, but the process, and some of you will have been through this recently, the process of trying to design a new bathroom, get all the kit that fits in the right way, make sure that everything comes together. It's expensive and it's complicated, and people just get weary and abandon projects. So there's a small tech startup in Manchester called Digital Bridge, grown from about 5 people a few years ago up to about 40 people now. And what they've been working on, and what they've partnered with B&Q a couple of years ago, and now I've just helped them win the first American client. They've just secured Home Depot as their first American client over in the US. Digital Bridge, team I'm very close to, basically built B&Q's online self-service bathroom designer. Yeah. So how can you and I as customers use augmented reality and artificial intelligence to create our own bathroom? Not just kind of drag and drop a few daft little things onto a screen, but have the platform tell us, no, you can't have that toilet there because you won't be able to open your door. And if you get in that bath, then you'll only be able to pick these taps. Yeah? That's what the platform does. And since deploying Digital Bridge, this small startup in Manchester, since deploying that platform, which the guys took about 4 or 5 years to get right, and got a bit of funding to get going, but eventually launched it into the market and now doing great things. Like B&Q have started to see bathroom sales increase, well, not exponentially, but increase significantly. They've had a couple of £1 million through the platform since 2018, which is just phenomenal. So here's the thing, when you take a traditional need and meet it with technology, good things can happen. And I think it's incumbent on both parties to just constantly be aware of this. And with that in mind, I just wanted to kind of share some priorities to help each of you, regardless of which sector you're in, to embrace a bit of this. What do we really focus on in the next 6 to 12 months to get the best out of digital? Okay, whether you're in the traditional segments, whether you're a digital and creative outfit, small agency, app developer, whatever, a startup, pure play, what are the key things to pay attention to? Well, you're going to get loads of tips through today, like I said before, but here's Sean's top tips for what they're worth. Okay, if you're in a traditional sector, the best thing you can do is I call it this: surface scan sponsor. Yeah, what do I mean? Like the councillor that kicked us off said, the opportunities for digital are limitless, which is great, but it's also phenomenally overwhelming. Yeah, there is so much that you could do with digital that if you're a traditional player, it's hard to know where to start or where to go next. Yeah. Do I try and optimize my supply chain? Do I look at robotics? Do I look at big data? How do I get my head around this whole online marketing deal? It's too much. What traditional businesses need to do is go through processes regularly where they surface to the top. This is the small slice of things that we're going to really improve in our business this year through technology. Yeah. And this is where Business Lincolnship really can help out. The team has a great team of advisors that can come and work with traditional businesses to really filter through a lot of the things you could do to really help you zoom into the things that you really should do. And leadership teams should, I would say, once every 6 months be running exercises where they say, what's next in terms of our transformation roadmap? Whether you're a small business or a big business, you should be doing that once every 6 months. How do we exploit technology in the way that's right for us every 6 months? Now, after you do that, it falls over. If you don't allocate time and resource and responsibility for somebody to go and scan the market as to, well, okay, if we really want to fix our online marketing, what are the right ways to do that? Who are some potential partners that we can team up with? Who are the right suppliers? What are the pricing that I should be going for? Yeah. You need to give somebody that responsibility and the time. Yeah, I'm working with a housing provider, social housing provider at the minute. They've got a small tech arm to it where they sell smart devices into their homes. And they have someone on the team who, half his job, so 2.5 days a week, he is responsible for scanning the market and just seeing who are the providers, who are the small startups, who are the agencies that we should be teaming up with. Because we're not going to get all this technology capability in-house. We need to form little ecosystems to help us grow. So surface, scan, and then sponsor. Provide top-level sponsorship. That person who is scanning the market, they probably aren't going to have the authority to really sponsor and drive the adoption of technology in the company. So at board level, you need people to really sponsor and drive that. Yeah. And if you're a traditional business, I hope that gives you a bit of a framework as to, okay, how do I filter through and make sense of all of this opportunity? Surface, scan, sponsor. Hope that's helpful. Now, listen, if you're a digital and creative business, if you're an agency or an app developer or you work in PR, what's the best thing that you can do right now? Well, listen, one thing that, and I do hold sessions on this book, but I'll just give you the headline. One of the biggest mistakes that I see, particularly agencies make, is when they take themselves out to market, and it's more competitive now than ever. We all know this, right? When you take yourself out to market, you put your message out there almost where you're puffing yourself up as a hero. We are the biggest agency in North Lincolnshire. We won this award last year. We have the greatest capability in SEO, blah, blah, blah. Now, the thing is, buyers aren't looking for heroes. Buyers want to be their own heroes and their own stories. You need to show up as a credible guide. The biggest mistake I see agencies making is that they're not talking to their customers and to their market as really helpful guides. You just look at the websites, your own websites or the websites of your competitors, and you're not speaking directly to your buyers and to your customers, talking about them, their challenges, their problems, the solutions, the use cases that are going to work for them. It's all about you, your offer, your product, your service. But listen, the agencies, and I'll give you a few examples, go and steal some copy from their websites if you like. But the agencies that I see that are really thriving are those that become really credible guides. And one way to do this is to prune your offer and to develop sector emphases. What do I mean by this? If you're a 7-man outfit and you've got 26 services on your homepage where you say, yeah, we do brand, we do apps, we do SEO, we do this, we do that, it's just not credible anymore, guys. You've got to prune your offer to be really good at a few things, or at least be known for a few things. If you're trying to be everything to everybody, that's a recipe for averageness by definition. Look at people like Uniform in Liverpool, or Code Computer Love in Manchester, or Fearless in Bristol, right? They're relentlessly niching in terms of what they do and who they serve. Yeah. And they don't niche down to just serve one sector. That's what I mean by not being exclusive. But they are known for serving a couple of sectors really well. Yeah. If you go onto Uniform, it's a big agency in Liverpool. If you go onto Uniform's website, you'll quickly feel that if you're a sports brand, if you're a consumer goods brand, Uniform are going to smash it out of the park for you when it comes to branding and digital campaigns. Yeah. They don't work with financial services outfits. They don't work with, you know, big banks and government departments. They've chosen to hone their focus, and they're the businesses that I see growing. So if you're a digital and creative business, maybe that's just a bit of food for thought. If you're a tech provider, if you're a startup, if you're a reseller, if you're someone who is invested in a pure play, what I would really encourage you to do right now is obsess over the use cases. And you know what I mean by this. Yeah, I had it the other day. So was working with a market intelligence platform. So this is a software as a service which helps businesses get data about their market and go and sell more intelligently to that market. They've got a brilliant product. They've got a great platform. You know, the VC back, they've been around for a few years. They've got some traction. They have absolutely no material and no staff in-house that help customers adopt the product well. And they don't have anybody that really as kind of articulated in a way that helps customers buy the software. Hey, listen, this is how you use our platform. Yeah, this is what it's really good for in practical, in real world use. This is how you use X product. The providers that do that the best, that tell the story of their product, not just around what it's technically capable of, but how it's used in the real world through concrete examples and stories, they're the tech providers that are getting the most traction in the marketplace, because people are overwhelmed with information. The frequency and speed of what's coming at us is frightening, and buyers need things to be made super simple and super relevant. So if you're a tech provider, what I need you to do is really obsess over how do we articulate the use cases of our service or our product, and how do we help buyers really quickly tune into that. That's how you'll thrive through this dip and how you'll come out of it with traction. So I've got a couple of minutes left. Last paradox, I promise. You choose to go faster when you choose to do less. That's an idea that doesn't seem to go together. You know, you choose to go faster when I choose to do less. Well, if I want to do, you know, I want to go faster, sure, it's about working more, it's about working harder, it's about adding stuff in, right? No. And I'll tell you for why. Some of you will have come across what's called the Google Design Sprint. Okay, so this was a process, or this is a process that was designed at Google because Google were frustrated in how long it took to deliver projects. Google, you know, one of the biggest companies on earth, and they were frustrated. They said, we're too slow. And they looked to enhance their own speed to market with things. And they built this product. Well, it was a guy called Jake Knapp who actually, you know, wrote the book. And Jake was on the team who basically created Gmail, you know, back in the day. And he worked at Google and then Google Ventures. And he built this thing called a sprint, not an agile sprint, a Google Design Sprint. And a sprint is effectively, you know, a simple structured process to relentlessly align and prioritize and accelerate projects. Yeah. Originally, it was taking projects to market, but now it's evolved into, you know, a process which a business can use to accelerate any kind of problem. Yeah. How do we accelerate our strategy? How do we approach digital? How do we fill in the blank? If you're spinning the wheels on a question for ages, you probably need a sprint to help you solve it. Okay. Now, in 2018, I was lucky enough to head out to San Francisco and do a bit of work with Google and with a partner that I do some stuff with called AJ Smart, and really learn and deeply understand how do you take the design sprints and apply it to business problems. Okay. And without kind of, you know, because I know I'm running out of time, without getting into detail, what we've been doing for the last couple of years is really using the sprint methodology to help digital, tech, and traditional businesses really speed up how they collaborate and how they kind of adopt technology for their advantage. Okay, and we've done big events in Manchester, you know, obviously in person when it was cool and legal to meet up in person, and you could be shoulder to shoulder without fear of borrowers coming along and hitting you on the head. In the last kind of couple of months, we've been doing stuff obviously online through the beautiful world of Zoom, which we're all sick of, but we're making the best of it, aren't we? Yeah. Sprints work. I wish I could tell you loads and loads about sprints, but I'm not going to, because today's not about that. But what I would really encourage all of you, all of you to do is have a look at sprints. Go and buy the book. Just buy it off Amazon. It's a tenner. You know, have a look at the design sprints. Do a bit of research on how you could use sprints. You know, a structured, simple, straightforward approach yeah, to make some decisions around what do we prioritize, what are we going to invest in, how do we grow at pace. Yeah, I just want to sow that in there as a seed. So listen, I'm going to recap now. I hope that's been helpful, and here's my key points for you. Really, I want us all to be embracing a bit of paradox. Yeah, and the 4 paradoxes I've given you today are this. The odds are absolutely against success. You know, it's this Stockdale idea. You know, we have to, as leaders, confront the brutal reality of where we're at. And yet we give ourselves the best chance of succeeding if we marry that brutal confrontation of reality with the faith that we'll absolutely succeed. And I know that's hard, but that's what we all need to do as leaders right now. Paradox number 2 is tradition and craft thrive through technical innovation. If you're in a traditional sector, you know that your success, just like Councillor said before, is going to rest on how well you adopt and use digital technology. New technologies need old traditions so they can be usefully adopted, giving you loads of examples of that. And you choose to go faster when you choose to do less. The sprint approach helps you scrape away some of the non-essentials so you can really focus on what's going to make the biggest difference. I'm coming to time now. I really trust that's been useful. I say my name is Sean Sankey, Scouser living in Yorkshire, working all over the country. You can reach me, there's my email address, and on LinkedIn. I'll be hanging around the conference for today. I say, trust that's been useful. I'm going to stop sharing my slides, and hopefully, if I come back in, then Zoe, you'll be able to take over.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks for joining us today and sharing experiences and insight with us. There is no denying that 2020 has been a challenge, but I do think it would be wrong of us not to recognise the positive change that can come out of time. And as Sean touched on with his first paradox, this year has taught us to get our heads down, use all the problem-solving skills that we can muster, and find a way out of a seemingly impossible situation.